The British Museum has gone all out for this manga exhibition. And that's fitting for an art form that's also now a global cultural phenomenon.
We wanted to show manga in the round, meaning not just manga's reality, not just its history, but we wanted to show manga from all different aspects. So to give the visitor a chance to really become fluent in manga, but to also understand manga's impact and find their own manga, and then see a little bit more about its societal impact.
The British Museum has collected manga for a long time. Its roots can be traced back to Japanese medieval scrolls, but the manga we know really began in the 19th century. This kabuki theatre curtain, a precursor to modern manga, dates from 1880. Since World War II, the popularity of manga has exploded. But what is it about the art form that appeals to so many people?
It's not didactically narrative. What it does is it shows you before the drawing, it shows you before the action. So in Poklam by the famous Hagiomoto, and she shows one scene of a man's face being hit, and she shows the hand coming, but not the point of impact. Then you see the after effect, the blow from the hit, the older man falls down the stairs and dies. You have to imagine the actual impact.
Hagiomoto is a master of suspense and feeling, which has made her one of Japan's most famous manga artists.
I grew up with a lot of manga around me, and then when I was little, there were a lot of new expressions of manga that were coming out that were very exciting. For example, Tezuka Osam's Astro Boy, and then there are lots and lots of manga for kids, for boys and girls, and I was really inspired by them. I really enjoyed them, and also I found consolation in it. And then I also wanted to draw it myself, and I got inspired, and that's how I started.
She tells me the story of one of her most famous works, The Willow Tree, of a young boy growing up without his mother. It's full of stillness and sadness. This is the biggest ever exhibition of manga outside Japan, and it provides an amazing insight into what is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But alongside all the history, facts and figures, there are some cool interactive side notes too, including this photo booth, which shows you what you might look like as a manga character. Manga is very cinematic. There are less words than Western comics, which means the pictures do most of the work. This exhibition certainly captures manga's populism and gives a sense of the scale of this art form's impact, not just in Japan, but worldwide. Manga at the British Museum is on display until August. Miranda Atty, TRT World, London.
Now, here to talk more about this exhibition, as well as manga's reputation both in and outside of Japan, is comics expert Paul Gravett. Paul, welcome to Showcase. And first off, please tell me what makes manga such a huge cultural phenomenon in Japan?
Yeah, comics in Japan are extraordinarily powerful. They are really the largest medium, the largest version of comics in the world. Nowhere else makes more comics or reads more comics than Japan. It's a massive $4 billion industry. The reasons for this are many, but they include the fact that the medium has developed over many, many years, many centuries. It's definitely connected way back to some of the images like we have behind us here, these extraordinary painted scrolls and theatre curtains and prints. Most people have heard of Hokusai's wave, that was, in many senses, those images were way ahead of their time compared to other countries, and in many ways paved the way for what we have today. Today, manga is so big also because it's extremely topical, extremely sensitive to the zeitgeist, to the changes in life and the world. It's able to respond very quickly to new ideas and new questions, and that way it's kept very much alive.
And how do you think manga is perceived outside of Japan?
Yeah, manga is misunderstood outside Japan probably because it's when it was first exported, which is really quite late. It was only really began to be exported, I suppose, in the 70s to the West. A very limited amount of material came over. Much of it was also, of course, exported through anime, Japanese animation, and some of that content was quite adult. And certainly in many countries in the West, we're not used to the idea of comics and animation being suitable and even dealing with adult subjects. The Japanese have no problem about doing this. They've been doing it for many years, way back to at least to the 19th century, if not before. That was a big issue. The other, of course, is simply this is a big challenge to Western countries. There's no doubt there's a certain amount of protectionism and a resistance from Western publishers to the fact that we have a sort of tsunami or an invasion of comics from Japan in such quantity and such profusion of subjects that was seen definitely as a threat.
And Paul, Jonathan Jones from The Guardian says, quote, "I've rarely seen a show whose catalogue is so much more interesting than the display in the gallery," unquote. Do you agree with that?
Well, one of the key things about the manga exhibition is that they want to emphasize the storytelling aspect of manga. Manga isn't about individual drawings or individual pages. So wherever possible, they're trying to show sequences of pages so that you can read them. And of course, you read them usually from left to right, the opposite to many countries in the world, certainly to many Western languages. So it takes a time for people to accustom themselves to this. But what they've chosen are very good scenes, sometimes complete stories, which mean that you get a real flavor of what the story is about, the characters, the emotions. Because the key thing really about manga is it's not really just about telling stories, it's also about feeling stories. It's making you, the reader, the viewer, really identify and emote and find richness in the stories.
And why do you think manga continues to be both relevant and popular, especially in Japan?
Well, manga's kept so vibrant, even though the magazine sales are slumping because people are moving more and more to reading on digital, of course. Digital is absolutely one of the futures of comics, and manga included, reading on smartphones, for example, or online. But what's kept them alive particularly is that they are still telling very important stories. They've dealt, for example, just recently with the fallout, literally, of the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster. They're dealing, for example, in the story of My Brother's Husband about homophobia, confronting that for the first time. It's become also a successful TV show. That's worth mentioning, of course, as well, that manga is not just a printed thing, nor is it just an animated thing. It is also adapted into live-action TV and films and to many other forms of popular culture. It is ubiquitous. It's like breathing air. Manga literally is everywhere.
And I wonder what your impression of the show was. Do you think it would appeal to people who aren't that familiar with manga?
The challenge that British cinema faced is balancing the fan interest in seeing their favourite characters and the complete general public that perhaps is brand new to this enormous medium. And in that respect, it is slightly biased. Inevitably, there are some major publishers, Kodansha, Shogakukan, and Shueisha, the big three, if you like, who do really pretty much dominate, if not overwhelm, the exhibition with their material. And there's a risk, I think, of not displaying quite enough of the real full spectrum of publishing of manga, including some very unusual, original, underground, alternative styles, which I think are certainly popular and certainly give a bigger, clearer picture of what manga is fully like. But it's an extremely successful way to learn and experience manga for yourself.
Comics expert Paul Gravett, good to have you on our show today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.